Welcome to Chapter 1. As you can see, I don't have the PowerPoints right here because I want to show you where on Blackboard you can find the PowerPoints without the audio. Because a good way in which to do the class is to actually print out the PowerPoint presentation, generally in a 3 or 6 slides per page format. And as you go along and listen to the video, make your notes on those PowerPoints. So where would you find the PowerPoints without the audio? Well, you go onto Blackboard and you go into your course resource and informations folder, and you click onto there, and inside of there are many folders, and the one you want to look for the lecture notes is right here. In here, you see that there are 2 columns. One column is the PowerPoint presentations, and the other one is in a PDF, the same slides, but in the PDF format. I did that just in case you don't have the particular version of PowerPoint that I have. So we're doing Chapter 1. All you do is you click onto Chapter 1, then you have to let your computer download it, and then hit Open. I'm going to get rid of that, so I have a full page of the slide. And now we're ready to begin Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is we're going to be dealing with something called descriptive statistics, and it's the graphical or picture representation of data. But first we have to collect a whole bunch of vocabulary so that when I talk, we understand the particular words or vocabulary that I'm using are statistics vocabulary. So we're going to start increasing our statistics vocabulary. So here we go. So what is statistics? It's a science that involves the extraction of information from data that's obtained during an experiment or a sample. Now, so with statistics, it involves the design of the experiment or the sampling procedure, the collection and analysis of the data that comes from either the experiment or the sampling procedure, and making inferences or statements about the population based upon the information in the sample that you took. So statistics is the science of reasoning with data. Very much our quantitative reasoning that we read in the syllabus. So you can see why it fulfills the quantitative reasoning for our general education requirement. So it's the science of collecting, organizing, summarizing, and then analyzing that information to draw conclusions or answer a particular question or questions we were asked or asking. Now we'll be asked a particular question, so we have to either have individuals and variables that we're going to be looking at. So what's an individual? What's the objects described by a set of data? It could be people, animals, or things. And a variable. What's a variable? It's any characteristic of a particular individual. It can take on different values for different individuals. So let's look at what is data. Well, data is a collection of values of a set of characteristics for a set of individuals. And you're collecting it for a particular study. So here we'll give an individual this particular survey, and we'll be able to collect 5 different pieces of information or 5 different variables. And the variables in this particular study, the first one would be their first and last initial. The other variable would be gender. The third variable would be state of birth. The fourth would be number of years with present employer. And the 5th variable for a particular individual would be the profession. And it would be given a letter, A, B, C, all the way to N, where A meant executive, B meant financial or accounting, and so forth. So we could collect this data, let's say, for 10 individuals. So for 10 individuals, we'll have 5 bits of information. So altogether, we would have 50 pieces of data. So let's look at let's say that we look at 5 different people, and this is just a quick look. We have this data set or table. It's the collection of all observations. That is the values of all the variables for a set of individuals collected for a particular study. And as I said, in this particular example, we're looking at 5 individuals. So we're going to have 25 bits of information that we're looking at. So each row and each column have a meaning, and then the intersection of a row and a column is a specific variable for a specific person. So let's go over some vocabulary again, and then re-go over what I just said. So an individual, it's an entity on which information is collected. It's an object or a subject, or we call it an experimental unit. The variable, it's the measurement or characteristic of interest for an individual. So in our case, we had the first column was one of our variables, and remember, that was for their initials. The second column was their sex. The third column is what state they were born in. The fourth column, or the fourth variable, we found out was how many years with their present employer. And the fifth is what type of job they had. So an observation, what is that? It's the set of all measurements. The variable values, that is collected for a single individual. So, as you can see, the row is a single observation. In other words, it's individual number 4 with he has his or her initials as DW. That is the observation. So we have, for that particular person, we have 5 observations to look at. So that intersection of the variable and the single observation we see there is that particular individual, we were looking for the state of birth. And he or she was born in Alabama. So that's how we would take our data set. Now, looking at it like that, if we had, let's say, 50 people, that would be, whoa, overwhelming. So we have to figure out better ways to organize the data. And we're going to be doing picture or graphical organization. So it will help us so it just doesn't look like a bunch of letters and numbers or just numbers. It's hard to analyze that. So we're going to learn how to take this raw data and we're going to learn how to organize it and summarize it in a way that makes sense so that we can do an analysis on it. So back to some more vocabulary. What does statistics involve? Well, we already said it's the collecting, organization, summarizing, and analyzing information to draw conclusions or to answer questions. And we have what's called a population. That's where we have to get our information from. It's the group to be studied, and it includes all the individuals in a group. Now, if we could always do the analysis on the population, that would be great, because whatever we would say the answer was, there wouldn't have to be any inferences involved. We would just say, here's our conclusion. But a lot of times that's not feasible to do. It's either too time-consuming, there's no way to get the full population, or cost prohibitive. So what we have to do is we have to get a sample. And a sample is a subset of the population. It's often used to do the analysis because getting access to that entire population, as I said, is impractical. So we need to make sure, number one, our subset, this sample, is an excellent representation of the population. And we'll talk about ways in which we can do that so that we can make very good inferences about the population. We've got 2 different types of statistics. Descriptive statistics is the statement about a sample, organizing and summarizing that information that's collected. Inferential statistics is the generalization of that sample result to statements about the population. So again, if we had to do an analysis on the population, inferential statistics is not necessary. It's when we have the sample and we have to make inferences about the population, that's where inferential statistics comes about. Now, the process of statistics consists of 4 steps. Identifying the research objective. In other words, what's the question? We just don't go out and collect data for no reason, so we have to have some sort of objective. How do we collect the information that's needed? Organizing and summarizing the information, and then drawing conclusions from that information. Now, in step 1, identifying the research objective, what questions are to be answered, and what groups should we be studying? Collecting the information needed, can you access the entire population? If you can't, then how am I going to collect a really good representative sample of the population? And what other methods are available and appropriate? In step 3, for organizing and summarizing the data, that's descriptive statistics. We can use visual methods such as charts and graphs. This is chapter 1. And numerical methods such as calculations. That's what we're going to learn in chapter 2. And then we're going to draw conclusions from that information. That's inferential statistics. That's it, in other words, when we have a sample. So various methods are appropriate for different questions and different types of data sets. Now this ends part 1 of our chapter 1. I'll be back with part 2.